The cafe was empty except for one steaming cup of tea. A man, hair slightly disheveled, sat alone at a corner table, staring into the swirling liquid as if it could answer everything. Silence hung thick in the air, interrupted only by the soft clink of teaspoons against porcelain. Then a sudden giggle broke the quiet. Three small shadows appeared at the edge of the table, tiny hands gripping the backs of chairs. The girls, identical in mischief, leaned forward. Their whispered words cut through the calm like a blade. "Pretend you're our father." He looked up, eyes steady but unreadable. Nothing about him screamed readiness for this, and yet in that brief pause, the world hinted that he was far more capable than anyone in the room could imagine. They had misjudged him, they were wrong. The apartment was small, neatly kept, with the faint hum of a refrigerator and the soft ticking of a wall clock marking each deliberate second. Sunlight filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting long stripes across the hardwood floor. He moved with a quiet rhythm, methodical, almost invisible to anyone who might have glanced through the window. In the kitchen, a kettle hissed softly. He measured tea leaves into a cup, careful to pour hot water with precision. The steam rose in a thin wisp, curling around his hands before dissipating into the morning light. Every motion was practiced, efficient. A single father, yes, but not clumsy, not distracted. Yet to anyone passing by, he might have seemed just another solitary man beginning his day. Bills lay stacked on the counter, addressed in neat handwriting. He scanned them with steady eyes, crossing off notes and marking due dates. The apartment was silent except for these small, ordered sounds, the click of a pen, the scrape of a spoon against porcelain. It was a world of routine, of control over the small, mundane details of life. In the living room, photographs leaned against the wall on a small shelf. Three young girls smiled back at him, frozen in mid-laughter. Triplets, identical in their tiny features with bright eyes and unruly curls. He studied each photo for a long moment, a soft exhale escaping him. Their absence left the apartment feeling vast, empty, yet alive in memory. He poured himself a cup of tea, lifting it slowly, inhaling the aroma before taking the first careful sip. The taste was grounding, ordinary, but even in this quiet domesticity, his mind was alert. Every sound outside the apartment, cars on the street, the faint bark of a dog, the distant footsteps from the hallway, registered with a subtle attentiveness that betrayed more than a simple morning ritual. The small details spoke of discipline, the way he folded the tea towel after drying it, the way his shoes were aligned perfectly near the door, the precise timing with which he checked the stove before moving to the living room. A single father, yes. A man with responsibilities, yes. But there was something beneath the calm exterior, an unspoken capability that suggested this routine had purpose beyond mere survival. He glanced at the clock again, a few minutes before the cafe opened. Today, like every day, he would step into the world that assumed he was ordinary, predictable, manageable. The world had no reason to guess at the depth of his competence, the restraint built into every careful gesture. In the apartment alone, he could simply be a father, or the quiet, unseen architect of order in a chaotic world. Before leaving, he took one last look at the photographs. The girl's eyes seemed to catch his, holding him to a promise he would never speak aloud. He turned, lifted his coat from the hook, and stepped into the hallway, key in hand, shoes perfectly aligned. The building was silent, unaware of the steady authority leaving its threshold. Outside, the city waited, loud, bustling, and full of assumptions about who he was, and he walked into it, unremarkable, measured, unnoticed. A cup of tea had been his only companion until now, but the day had begun, and for the world, he would remain exactly what it expected. The cafe door chimed softly as it opened. He looked up from the counter where he had ordered a simple breakfast, eyes narrowing slightly, not in suspicion, but in assessment. Three small figures entered, moving in perfect unison, their heads tilting to study him from across the room, triplets. He recognized them immediately from photographs, though he had only met them in fleeting visits and occasional weekends. They were quiet at first, trailing behind one another, glancing at the other patrons as if testing the space for safety. The oldest, though no more than 7, stepped forward, her curls bouncing with measured confidence. Her eyes met his directly, bright, inquisitive. "Pretend you're our father," she whispered, almost too softly for anyone else to hear. He froze for a fraction of a second, taking in the moment. The words were unexpected, playful, but with a hint of testing, a probe into boundaries. His hand rested on the edge of his cup, steady. No tremor, no visible surprise. To an outsider, it would have seemed as though he had heard nothing at all. But his mind catalogued every detail, their body language, the distance they kept from each other, the way their eyes scanned the room. He was aware of the cafe's patrons, the barista behind the counter, the angle of the sunlight through the windows. The girls inched closer, forming a triangle around him as he remained seated. "Please," the middle one added, tugging lightly at her sister's sleeve. Her gaze shifted to him and then back to the first sister, silently communicating a plan. He noticed it all. No words were wasted. The girls communicated efficiently, instinctively. He saw patterns where others would only see mischief. He finally allowed himself a small, controlled smile, not warmth, not indulgence, precision, a recognition that their request would be honored, but under his rules. He motioned subtly to the nearest empty table, a quiet invitation to sit. The girls followed without protest, their movement disciplined despite their age. He observed their posture, subtle tics, how they tested boundaries. Each small gesture registered. Other patrons glanced, noticing the unusual dynamic, but they remained distant, uninterested in intervening. He sipped his tea slowly, eyes flicking to their faces, noting expressions of curiosity, mischief, and perhaps a hint of insecurity. He remained calm, steady, every movement intentional. Even in this ordinary domestic setting, the control he held over the space was palpable. As he spoke, it was measured, almost too deliberate in its simplicity. "All right, for the time being I will." His words were soft, unassuming, but every inflection was carefully placed, commanding compliance without force. The girls leaned in, excitement flickering in their eyes, yet even in that small thrill, he observed, calculated, and guided. He maintained quiet authority over the situation. Moments passed. The cafe remained unaware of the subtle tension in the corner. He noticed the barista's glance, the way a napkin fell near the girl's table, and even how the light reflected off the glassware. To anyone else, he was simply a father agreeing to play a game with children. But for him, every second was an assessment: location, potential risk, their emotional state, and the invisible rules of engagement he had silently established. Finally, he set down his cup, straightened in his chair, and allowed his gaze to sweep across the girls one last time. There was trust forming between them, not naive, not casual. Quiet, measured trust. He would honor it, and in doing so he maintained control over more than just a game. His movements were restrained, deliberate. The world had expected a hapless single father. They had misjudged him. The girls exchanged looks of excitement, unaware of the quiet competence that defined him. Their whispered instructions had triggered a shift, subtle but unmistakable. And though the moment seemed ordinary to the untrained eye, a careful observer might have noticed the precision in his posture, the clarity in his gaze, the unspoken authority that already filled the space around him. As he finally stood to leave the table, guiding them with calm gestures toward the cafe exit, the city beyond awaited. They stepped forward together, a small trio of curiosity and innocence, and a man whose exterior belied the depth of his preparedness. Today, like every day, he would navigate the world under the weight of expectation, quietly, competently, invisibly. He paused at the cafe entrance. The girls clustered slightly behind him, eyes wide with expectation. The morning sunlight caught in their curls, highlighting the mischief and innocence in equal measure. He studied them not with doubt, but with a measured consideration that weighed possibilities and outcomes in fractions of a second. The request had been simple, almost playful: "Pretend you're our father." And yet the weight behind those words was unmistakable. It was not a game, it was a test, a probe into boundaries, authority, and trust. He set his bag down carefully, making no sudden movements. Every gesture was deliberate, a silent message that while he would engage, the rules were his to define. He looked at their faces individually. The oldest's eyes shone with curiosity, the middle child's with tentative hope, the youngest's with unwavering trust in her sisters. Each child communicated differently, yet each mirrored the others in subtle cues, a shared understanding that this adult would either meet their unspoken expectations or falter. He noticed the synchrony instantly, the way they moved and breathed almost as one, and cataloged it as a pattern of behavior. His hands hovered briefly over his coat, then folded neatly in front of him. The pause was intentional. It gave him time to assess the environment, the cafe, the other patrons, potential interruptions. Every detail registered: a coffee cup wobbling near a table, a patron's glance, the faint hiss of the espresso machine. The room remained quiet, unaware that tension now existed in the corner. Finally, he spoke, soft but clear. "All right, we'll try it for now." The words were simple, almost casual, yet carried an authority that required attention. He did not raise his voice, he did not dramatize. The command was in the stillness between his words, in the measured pause that followed. The girls leaned forward slightly, sensing the shift without fully understanding it. As they settled into their positions at a nearby table, he guided them with subtle hand movements, minimal, almost imperceptible. Each direction was gentle but firm, reinforcing boundaries without force. His attention never wavered, eyes flicking to the youngest to ensure she remained secure, to the middle to anticipate sudden movement, to the eldest to read her reactions. He acted not as a parent teaching manners, but as a quiet strategist managing a delicate operation. Moments passed. The girls whispered among themselves, testing limits, while he maintained calm control, responding only when necessary. A dropped sugar packet drew his attention. Without a word, he retrieved it, placed it neatly beside their cups, and returned to his seat. The gesture was minor, mundane, but it carried reassurance, structure, and authority all at once. Internally, he cataloged each movement and response. The youngest's tendency to fidget, the middle one's subtle attempts to redirect attention, the eldest's inclination to lead. He noted patterns, assessed risk, and prepared for contingencies. All this while maintaining the facade of ordinary calm. To anyone observing, he was simply a man engaging with children. But beneath the surface, every nerve, every reflex, every thought served preparation and readiness. For the first time, he allowed himself the faintest hint of a smile, a bridge between authority and connection. It was quiet, restrained, measured, but real. The girls responded immediately, sensing reassurance, feeling structure without restriction. They did not yet know why he was different, why his presence demanded attention even without demonstration of force. They simply trusted him intuitively, instinctively. And as he sipped the final warmth from his cup, the cafe remained oblivious to the subtle shift in control. The world assumed he was hesitant, inexperienced, ordinary. The truth, quiet and restrained, was far more formidable. In this simple act, accepting their request, setting boundaries, guiding them with precision, he had already demonstrated competence, vigilance, and calm authority. The girls' whispered giggles floated across the table, and for a fleeting moment he allowed the ordinary pleasure of connection. But beneath it, the readiness persisted. Observation, strategy, subtle authority, all silently prepared for whatever would come next. The world would continue to misjudge him. And he would let it quietly, patiently, with every action measured, precise, controlled. The morning sunlight had given way to a haze of clouds outside the cafe, the city's usual hum muted by an early mist. He guided the girls carefully along the sidewalk, maintaining a steady pace that balanced their enthusiasm with subtle control. Each footstep was measured, each glance accounted for. Even in a public space, he was aware of potential hazards, of the unpredictability of others, of the world beyond the small triangle of safety he maintained around them. Without warning, the first challenge appeared. A small group of older children loitered near the corner, shouting and laughing, their attention drawn to the girls. They approached with bold curiosity, jostling lightly, testing boundaries. The triplets froze, instinctively clustering closer together. He felt the shift in the air, tension coiling like a spring. The world had assumed he was ordinary. It had misjudged him. He did not react with anger or aggression. Instead, he paused, scanning the environment with methodical precision. Distances, exit routes, the presence of bystanders, all registered instantly. His hand hovered near the girl's shoulders, a silent reassurance rather than a physical shield. Every movement, every breath, every micro-adjustment was deliberate. Calm authority radiated outward, visible in posture, in measured steps, in the unwavering gaze that met the approaching group. One of the older children stepped forward, blocking the girl's path. "Hey, you're with him." The question carried mockery and challenge, testing not only the children but the man they clung to. The youngest looked up at him, eyes wide, silently asking for guidance. He met the gaze of the older child with steady calm, no words, no threat, yet the presence alone communicated boundaries firmly established. He inclined his head slightly, just enough to indicate attention. The air seemed to thicken around them. A bystander glanced in curiosity, sensing tension but not understanding its depth. The older children hesitated. They did not hear his voice, yet the subtle command in his stance, in the rhythm of his movement, in the controlled intensity in his eyes, conveyed a weight they did not anticipate. They backed slightly, testing again, unsure. The girls, sensing the shift, straightened in response. Their tiny movements mirrored his calm confidence. He allowed them a subtle nod of reassurance, an unspoken communication that they were safe, that he held control. They understood instinctively that he would manage the encounter without chaos, without unnecessary force, without exposing the depth of his capability. A second attempt came, a shove, slight but deliberate, meant to provoke. He acted with precision, not with violence, but with intervention that was immediate and undeniable. His hand moved to steady the youngest, his presence between the girls and the aggressors, his body language closing gaps and asserting authority. No words, no shouting. Just calm, controlled positioning that altered the dynamic entirely. The older children exchanged glances, uncertain, unprepared for such measured command. Their confidence waned, and one muttered something under his breath before retreating. The girls exhaled collectively, a shared relief that was subtle but palpable. The first challenge had been met, no drama, no spectacle, yet the authority had been clearly communicated. They had misjudged him. He watched the group disperse, noting small details, the hesitation in their steps, the way they glanced back once, the brief recognition that their assumptions had been wrong. He allowed himself no satisfaction, only observation. Competence, when displayed quietly and precisely, needed no fanfare. The girls sensed the calm but did not yet understand the full weight of it. As they continued down the street, he guided them with subtle gestures, maintaining rhythm, structure, and safety. The morning felt heavier now, a reminder that challenges, both minor and significant, could appear without warning. He did not let his mind relax. He catalogued, assessed, and prepared silently for what might come next. The city, the world, the unpredictable nature of human behavior, all were elements he considered constantly, invisibly, while remaining outwardly composed. By the time they reached the park, the immediate threat had passed. The girls moved freely now, laughter returning cautiously, yet every movement remained within the invisible boundaries he had set. He observed, calibrated, and maintained authority without interference, a quiet presence that commanded obedience and trust simultaneously. The first challenge had been met, not with force, but with precision, restraint, and subtle control. Even in this ordinary world of sidewalks, strangers, and innocent games, the truth was clear. The man they assumed was just a single father was far more capable than anyone could imagine. And though no one outside the small circle of the girls truly understood, the foundation had been laid. He was ready. The challenges ahead would escalate, but the measure of control, of calm authority, of quiet vigilance had already been proven. The city's morning haze had thickened into a faint drizzle, the park now slick with moisture, reflecting the gray sky above. The girls clung closer as they moved, each step deliberate but unhurried under his quiet guidance. The first challenge had passed, yet he knew instinctively that it was merely a precursor. Small threats often presaged larger ones. Subtle tests were followed by real trials. He observed the park's surroundings carefully, noting benches, lampposts, pathways, and even the positions of strangers scattered through the area. His mind worked in patterns, possible exits, obstacles, potential points of cover. The girls remained unaware, believing they were simply enjoying an outing, their trust placing them entirely in his hands. but in his mind, every step was part of a tactical map. A sudden commotion drew his attention, a pair of teenagers arguing loudly near the park entrance. Their voices carried across the space, tension growing palpable. The girls instinctively slowed, glancing at him for direction. He paused, assessing. The situation was not immediately dangerous, but it demanded preemptive control. The subtle shift of authority he had established in the cafe and on the sidewalk needed reinforcement. He moved strategically, guiding the girls toward a less exposed pathway. His movements were calm, fluid, precise, yet unassuming. The youngest reached for his hand instinctively. He allowed it for reassurance, not need. Each step maintained the illusion of normalcy while subtly redirecting the environment to reduce risk. The girls followed without question, mirroring his measured pace. He chose a bench near a clump of trees, their overhanging branches providing visual cover without confining space. He seated the girls carefully, instructing them in soft, precise tones to stay seated and observe quietly. No alarm in his voice, no panic, only clear guidance. Their attention shifted naturally from the argument to him, understanding that his presence meant security without needing full comprehension. As the noise escalated, he assessed again. The teenagers were moving closer, tension visible in body language. He remained seated, subtly shifting posture to maintain line of sight on both the girls and the potential threat. Every micro-movement was calculated: weight distribution, hand placement, shoulder alignment. He could react instantly if necessary, yet outwardly remained calm and composed. Then came the tactical shift, the moment to assert control not with confrontation but with strategy. He picked up a small object from his coat pocket, a compact whistle, inconspicuous, a tool for subtle signaling. With a soft, barely audible click, he pressed it, alerting the girls to remain still, yet signaling readiness to intervene if required. A silent code had already been established between them through previous gestures and subtle commands. The teenagers, momentarily distracted by a passing dog, did not notice the shift, but in the pattern of their movements, he saw opportunity. He directed the girls with a nod, instructing them to adjust their positions subtly, increasing their cover while maintaining visibility. Each small action reinforced discipline and authority, ensuring the girls remained safe without overt alarm. His calm presence and preemptive positioning altered the environment. Passers-by noticed nothing, yet the potential threat had been neutralized before escalation. The teenagers drifted past, unaware of the invisible barrier of competence and quiet command surrounding the trio. The girls remained seated, their confidence in him quietly solidified. He allowed a single, subtle exhale, invisible to anyone but himself, knowing the tactical shift had worked. Even as normalcy returned to the park, he maintained vigilance. Every pedestrian, every movement, every sound was noted and catalogued. He had not yet revealed his true capability, nor would he. The tactical shift was about preparation, prevention, and control, not spectacle. The world believed him an ordinary single father. He allowed them to remain deceived. The girls' small smiles returned, tentative yet genuine, as they resumed their quiet game. He observed, guiding them without intruding, providing structure invisibly. The tactical shift had achieved more than safety. It had instilled subtle understanding of trust, boundaries, and authority in the youngest observers. They did not know it consciously, but they were learning what it meant to rely on someone capable, someone whose quiet presence carried strength. By the time they left the park, rain falling lightly, the world outside remained unaware of the competence that had protected them. He maintained control without recognition, authority without display. The first challenge had been met, the tactical shift had been executed, and he moved forward, quietly prepared for the escalating trials that would inevitably follow. By mid-afternoon, the city's streets carried a muted tension beneath the hum of ordinary life. The girls had grown comfortable, their laughter returning in cautious bursts, yet he sensed the change before it became visible. The world was always unpredictable, and small disturbances rarely remained small. The first sign came from a parked van across the street. Its engine hummed quietly, inconspicuous but persistent, a subtle anomaly in the rhythm of traffic. He observed the driver, a man who did not belong in this part of the neighborhood, clothing slightly mismatched, eyes darting repeatedly to the park. There was nothing overt, nothing that would draw casual attention, but his instincts, honed through years of disciplined training and real-world operations, detected the pattern instantly. He subtly shifted the girls' attention toward a nearby ice cream stand, gently guiding them without alarming them. Each movement was precise, a hand on a shoulder, a tilt of the head, a soft word. They adjusted naturally, trusting his calm judgment. Outwardly, it looked ordinary. Inside, every nerve, every sense, and every observation was attuned to potential threats. The van moved slightly closer, slowing as though testing the environment. He took a mental note of its position, possible escape routes, and the likelihood of interference from bystanders. He cataloged micro-expressions of passers-by, minor movements in the van's reflection in a shop window, even the shifting weather that could obscure line of sight. Each detail mattered. A sudden sharp cry from the youngest made him pivot instantly. A bicycle had skidded nearby, and the child had almost collided with it. He intervened with controlled speed, guiding her out of harm's way. No alarm, no frantic reaction, just precise, effective intervention. The smallest moments became tests, and each was an opportunity to assert subtle authority, maintain safety, and reinforce trust. The driver in the van began exiting his vehicle. Hands moved inside the door as if retrieving something. The escalation was immediate now, visible to him alone. He assessed the situation calmly. The girls clustered instinctively, ready to follow his lead, unaware of the full danger. His mind calculated distance, reaction time, and environmental variables. No one else noticed the impending threat except him. He made a decision. Every movement was deliberate as he guided the girls behind a row of benches, using their positioning to provide partial cover while maintaining line of sight. A soft gesture, a quiet nod, communicated readiness without panic. His body shifted slightly, weight balanced, shoulders squared, posture commanding without a word. Authority, silent and firm, radiated outward. The man from the van advanced, now clearly armed. The escalation had moved from suspicion to active threat. Bystanders began to notice tension, but he remained the calm center in the storm. Every word he had spoken to the girls, every gesture, every small act of guidance had prepared them, though they did not yet comprehend the depth of his capability. He reached subtly into his coat pocket, retrieving a small, unassuming object, a tactical whistle, a communication device. With a barely audible click, he transmitted a signal, activating an unseen safeguard he had prepared. The girls, sensing his authority, followed his minimal guidance flawlessly, moving just as he had trained them to in subtle rehearsal of boundaries and compliance. The man stepped closer, scanning the park, unaware that he was now being observed, catalogued, and anticipated by someone far more capable than appearances suggested. The tension snapped in the air, palpable like a drawn bowstring waiting for release. Yet he did not panic, did not shout, did not react impulsively. Calm, precise, and restrained, he controlled the unfolding scene through presence, anticipation, and quiet command. In an instant, the situation began to shift. A subtle footstep behind the van indicated backup, tactical awareness on his part, detecting the movement before anyone else. The escalation now required measured response. He guided the girls further into cover, adjusted his stance, and communicated with minimal gestures, all while observing the aggressor's body language and anticipating the next move. Every second counted, every decision was a silent calculation. The man in the van hesitated, uncertainty creeping in. He had underestimated the quiet authority of the single father. He saw composure, precision, and a presence that commanded control without drama. The escalation had reached a critical threshold, yet the balance remained in his favor, not through force, but through command, preparation, and an understanding of human behavior. The girls looked to him instinctively, sensing calm and control. They had witnessed tension rise, danger become real, yet they had survived the initial surge without chaos, without panic, guided by an unseen hand of competence. Their trust was no longer naive. It had been earned, reinforced through subtle authority and quiet strategy. Even as the threat remained tangible, the park quieted. The escalation had demonstrated the true depth of his capability, though no one outside his small circle understood it. He remained calm, vigilant, and precise, aware that each movement, each adjustment, each small gesture had prevented disaster. The world still assumed he was ordinary. And he allowed them to remain deceived, every silent action reinforcing the disparity between perception and reality. By the time the van drove away, the immediate threat had receded. The girls were safe, unaware of how close danger had come or how deftly it had been handled. He guided them forward with the same calm presence, measured steps, and quiet authority that had carried them through the escalation. He remained the invisible protector, unnoticed by the world, his competence fully exercised yet still concealed. The late afternoon sun slanted through the city streets, casting long shadows that crept across the park and into the narrow alleyways beyond. He had led the girls safely through the first surge of danger, yet he knew the next decision would demand more than quick thinking. It would demand a choice between immediate safety and ethical responsibility, between personal risk and the well-being of others. The van had returned, this time parked directly across the street. Its presence was deliberate, menacing, calculated. The man who had emerged earlier was no longer alone. Another figure now appeared in the passenger seat. The threat had escalated in scale, and the city's passers-by remained oblivious. He assessed quickly. There was no time for hesitation. A direct confrontation could protect the girls but endanger others, including innocent bystanders. He would have to act decisively but carefully. He positioned the girls behind a low stone wall, partially obscured from view yet within a field of vision that allowed him to monitor every movement. Their small hands gripped his, eyes wide with trust, waiting for guidance they could not fully understand. He inhaled slowly, centering himself. Every instinct honed over years of discipline training now demanded a balance between assertive action and moral restraint. The first moral consideration presented itself immediately. The aggressors had not yet acted violently toward anyone, but had created the potential for harm. He could neutralize the threat in a single, forceful movement, but doing so in a public area risked collateral damage, witnesses, and legal consequences. He had chosen to protect, not dominate, to prevent, not punish. Every fiber of his being urged patience, yet the weight of responsibility pressed heavily. The girls shifted slightly, sensing the tension but remaining still, reflecting the quiet discipline he had instilled through soft gestures and subtle commands. His eyes scanned the area, civilians crossing streets, cyclists glancing at the unusual gathering, a dog walker approaching the periphery. Every element added complexity. Any misstep could transform the situation into chaos. Then came the silent decision. He would make a controlled sacrifice, a calculated exposure of himself to divert attention and absorb risk, allowing the girls and surrounding civilians to remain untouched. He stepped partially into view, ensuring his posture was calm yet commanding, signaling that he was in control of the immediate environment. It was a deliberate choice. He would draw the aggressor's attention, maintain leverage, and minimize harm, even if it meant personal danger. The man in the van noticed the movement and hesitated, uncertainty flickering across his features. That moment of pause was all he needed. He extended his hand slightly, fingers brushing the girls' shoulders as reassurance, and moved a step closer to the aggressors. His expression was measured, composed, revealing nothing of his inner readiness to counter force if necessary. Authority radiated without threat, presence conveyed command without aggression. A tense standoff unfolded, minutes stretching with the weight of potential consequences. He calculated timing, distance, and environmental advantage. A small trash bin, a fire hydrant, a lamppost, each element became part of a silent strategy, a tactical map drawn in the language of restraint. He did not act immediately. He waited, compelling the aggressors to reveal intent. Every second tested his discipline and moral resolve. Suddenly, the aggressors began to advance, their intentions now unmistakable. He He signaled the girls with a subtle nod, guiding them to adjust slightly behind cover. Then, using the minimal leverage of presence and unspoken authority, he maneuvered so that the man closest to the girls was momentarily isolated from his partner. A swift, precise verbal command, low and controlled, disrupted their coordination. It was not force, it was psychological control, born of quiet confidence and experience. The van's engine roared, another threat, yet he remained focused on the moral axis. Protect the innocent at all cost, absorb risk personally if needed, and restrain the use of force to absolute necessity. His stance, posture, and gaze communicated readiness without spectacle. The aggressors faltered, uncertainty now overtaking their confidence. Finally, the choice bore fruit. The van retreated, its passengers unsure whether the single man had coordinated backup or possessed some unseen capability. In truth, he had achieved victory without confrontation, using moral clarity, restraint, and calculated presence. The girls, unaware of the full depth of danger, remained safe. His sacrifice had been intangible, time, risk, and mental weight absorbed personally to shield those he had vowed to protect. As the threat dissipated, he guided the girls quietly away, each step a demonstration of calm, measured authority. The moral choice had been made, the invisible cost paid. No recognition would follow. The world would continue to see only a single father navigating ordinary streets, but the inner balance, the delicate equilibrium of protection, restraint, and ethical decision-making, was a testament to his hidden strength. By the time they returned to the relative safety of home, the girls' laughter had returned, tentative yet genuine. He allowed himself a single, silent exhale, carrying the weight of the day's escalation and the moral choice that had preserved innocence without exposing them to the world's harsh realities. The quiet authority remained unspoken, unacknowledged, yet fully exercised, a strength hidden in plain sight. Night had begun to settle over the city, turning the streets into a patchwork of deep shadows and harsh artificial light. The park, once alive with children and quiet afternoon activity, now felt hollow, punctuated only by distant car horns and the soft rustle of leaves. He could feel the tension vibrating through the air, the subtle shift of the world when danger looms, the kind that only someone trained to perceive minute changes could sense. The van appeared again, slower this time, deliberate. Its headlights cut across the dim street, illuminating the silhouettes of the girls huddled safely behind a low stone wall. He positioned himself between them and the vehicle, body square, posture controlled, yet radiating quiet authority. Every movement measured, every glance precise. The aggressors had returned for a final attempt. The confrontation was unavoidable. As the van stopped, two figures stepped out, flanking the vehicle, hands in pockets but weight shifting as though ready to draw weapons at any moment. He assessed them instantly: size, posture, apparent strength, potential tactics. His mind cataloged exit routes, line of sight, and civilians still nearby. He had trained for situations far worse than this, yet the stakes were intensely personal. The girls, their trust, their innocence, all depended on his ability to control the outcome without overstepping the line into unnecessary violence. The first figure advanced, stepping lightly, testing boundaries. He didn't flinch. Instead, he shifted slightly, a subtle adjustment of stance that communicated readiness without aggression. His voice, calm and deliberate, cut through the tension. "Step back, you don't want to do this." It wasn't a threat, it was a measured assertion of authority, quiet but undeniable. The second figure mirrored the first, hesitation flickering in their eyes. They had assumed the target would be easy, an ordinary man, perhaps distracted by the children he had been caring for. But the calm, restrained confidence in his posture, in his gaze, betrayed none of his ordinary facade. His quiet strength was a force they could neither see nor measure, yet it disarmed them. Then came the first real test. The lead aggressor lunged toward the girls, attempting intimidation through proximity. He moved before the attack could escalate, a single, deliberate step into the attacker's line of motion, hands guiding the body subtly but effectively to neutralize the movement. It was precision, not force, and it worked. The aggressor stumbled, caught off guard by the invisible control he wielded. The van's engine roared behind them, a backup attempt. He remained aware of every element, the threat inside, the potential for escape, the position of the girls. With a fluid motion, he guided the girls further behind cover, whispering minimal instructions, maintaining their calm. Each word, each gesture was calculated to reinforce obedience and safety without creating panic. The aggressors hesitated, visibly frustrated. Their confidence had been shattered not through violence, but through strategic control. He assessed again distance, reaction time, and potential for escalation. Then, with another quiet command, he disrupted their coordination, movement, body language, tone of voice, all subtly influencing their decisions. Every action was deliberate, every step controlled. The confrontation was still unfolding, yet he had never lost command. Suddenly, the second aggressor moved toward the van, reaching for what appeared to be a weapon. Time slowed for him, not in perception, but in calculation. He knew he could neutralize the threat immediately, but restraint demanded a better solution. Use their hesitation, exploit their uncertainty, minimize risk. A controlled movement of the wrist and a soft verbal cue sent the wrong signal to the aggressor, prompting them to pause, allowing the first aggressor to step back involuntarily. The equilibrium had shifted. The van's engine revved once more. Reinforcements, perhaps. But he had already accounted for them, scanning alleyways and side streets, predicting movement before it could occur. His eyes flicked to the girls, ensuring they remained unnoticed, safe, yet aware enough to respond if needed. Every second was a careful balance between exerting authority and preserving innocence. Then came the decisive moment. The lead aggressor lunged a second time, misjudging distance. He acted not with brute force, but with controlled intervention. A precise block, a subtle redirection, and an immediate step forward that put him squarely between threat and innocent. The aggressor stumbled, and the tension that had thickened the night air finally cracked. They hesitated, indecision overtaking aggression. Silence followed, a silence charged with authority. He remained still, posture unwavering, eyes locked on both aggressors. The van's engine slowed, tires crunching gravel as the occupants reconsidered their position. The girls, hidden just behind his protective frame, exhaled softly. No words were needed. The confrontation had been resolved through presence, restraint, and the quiet weight of competence. Finally, the aggressors retreated, the van speeding away into darkness. He watched until it was gone, ensuring no immediate threat remained. Only then did he allow a single, subtle exhale. His body relaxed slightly, but his vigilance never fully wavered. The final confrontation had been won, not through spectacle, not through overt aggression, but through measured control, strategic anticipation, and moral authority. The girls approached him tentatively, eyes wide with curiosity and relief. He knelt, gathering them close, whispering reassurances in quiet tones. They did not yet understand the depth of danger, nor the skill required to neutralize it. To them, he was a protector, a father figure. To the world, he remained the ordinary man they assumed him to be. Only he knew the full weight of what had transpired. As they walked home under the cover of night, the city around them oblivious, the final confrontation had cemented the truth. Strength need not be loud, authority need not be displayed. Control could be exerted silently, decisively, ethically, and effectively. The world still underestimated him, yet in that quiet night, he had demonstrated that he was fully capable of shaping outcomes, protecting innocence, and navigating danger with unshakable precision. The final confrontation had passed, but the resonance remained, trust earned, authority asserted, and innocence preserved. And he carried it all without recognition, without applause, maintaining the delicate balance between ordinary perception and extraordinary capability. The night had finally settled into a calm hush, broken only by distant sirens and the soft hum of streetlights. The city, unaware of the danger that had loomed mere hours ago, continued in its normal rhythm. He guided the girls along the quiet sidewalks, their small hands still clutching his, their trust implicit yet profound. The adrenaline that had held him taut for hours began to ebb, replaced by a heavy awareness of what had transpired, a weight he bore silently, without fanfare. The girls chattered softly, their voices a gentle contrast to the chaos of earlier. He responded with measured tones, never raising his voice, always calm, grounding them in a sense of safety. Their questions were simple. Are we going home now? Did the bad men go away? He answered with soft reassurances, leaving out the details that might frighten them further. In this moment, he was both guardian and guide, a steady presence in a world that had almost shattered. The van and its occupants were gone, but he knew the threat had not disappeared entirely. Opportunists could strike again, and intelligence had to be monitored. Yet the immediate danger had passed, and he allowed himself a brief, private acknowledgement of success. The confrontation had been resolved without injury, without spectacle, through careful observation, measured action, and quiet authority. The moral choice had been upheld, the innocent protected. Returning the girls to their temporary home, he lingered only briefly, making sure they were safely inside, their needs attended to by caretakers. Their smiles, tentative yet genuine, were reward enough. No accolades awaited him. No recognition would be given. He walked away quietly, his steps deliberate, posture controlled. The weight of the day's events pressed upon him, but he bore it as he always did, silently, responsibly, resolutely. In the solitude of his own small apartment, he removed his jacket and hung it carefully, each motion deliberate, almost ritualistic. He checked the equipment he had carried, the intercom, the emergency supplies, the tactical tools that had remained hidden but ready throughout the ordeal. Everything was accounted for. Everything was prepared for the next time the world demanded his intervention. He allowed himself a moment of reflection. The balance between ordinary life and extraordinary capability was delicate, and it had been maintained today. He replayed the events in his mind, not out of pride, but to ensure no detail had been overlooked. The tactical decisions, the moral choices, the restraint, the protective measures, all had been executed perfectly. Yet he remained aware that no one else would understand the depth of what had occurred. To everyone else, he was just a man, perhaps a single father, perhaps a quiet figure who had guided children home safely. To him, every action was a testament to discipline, training, and ethical responsibility. Sleep came late, and when it did, it was uneasy but necessary. The events of the day lingered, etched into memory with vivid clarity. The threat, the standoff, the quiet dominance of competence over chaos. Even in rest, he remained vigilant, body and mind alert to potential danger, yet tempered by the knowledge that he had done everything possible to protect the innocent. The quiet aftermath was a reminder that heroism was often invisible, unrecognized, and profoundly taxing. Morning arrived softly, sunlight spilling into his apartment. The city continued, oblivious, and the girls' laughter echoed faintly from the previous day, a reminder of innocence preserved. He prepared a simple breakfast, performing ordinary tasks with careful attention, each gesture an exercise in maintaining normalcy. The world saw only the single dad performing routine duties. Behind that ordinary mask, the day's lessons remained, the hidden authority unspoken but fully present. He glanced at the intercom handset, now resting quietly on the table. Its presence was unassuming, yet it had been a lifeline, a tool of control, a symbol of readiness. He had wielded authority without display, protection without spectacle. The girls had been safe, the threat neutralized, and the moral imperatives upheld. The quiet ending was not marked by applause, headlines, or recognition. It was marked by stillness, by the profound satisfaction of having done what was necessary, responsibly and ethically. As he stepped out into the city streets once more, blending into the crowd of oblivious commuters, he carried the events within him. The world did not know, and that was precisely as it should be. Authority, competence, and morality had been exercised fully, yet invisibly. And as always, he remained a single father first, a guardian second, and a hidden force of skill and restraint all the while. The quiet aftermath was complete, heavy with meaning, and fully earned. The sun had risen fully, casting a soft, golden light across the city streets. The noise of morning traffic and distant conversations filled the air, ordinary and unremarkable. He walked among the crowd, carrying nothing but a small backpack and a quiet mind. No one paused to notice him. No one knew the storm that had passed overnight, the van, the aggressors, the tension, the silent battle fought and won. He blended seamlessly into the rhythm of ordinary life, invisible yet fully present. At the cafe where he had taken tea countless times before, he ordered a simple cup, sitting at a corner table near the window. The world went on as usual, commuters grabbing coffee, baristas calling out orders, pedestrians navigating crosswalks. In this mundane routine, he found solace. The enormity of what had occurred just hours before remained contained within him, heavy yet unspoken. It was not recognition he sought, it was a personal acknowledgement of responsibility fulfilled. He glanced at his phone, seeing the messages from the girls' caretakers, expressing relief, gratitude, and casual thanks. They did not know the full extent of his intervention, and he did not correct them. There was no need. To them he was a father figure, a protector in a more ordinary sense. But internally he knew the depth of what had transpired, the threats neutralized, the moral choices made, the lives safeguarded through skill, restraint, and calm authority. That knowledge alone was reward enough. Outside, the city carried on. Emergency services, oblivious to the near crisis, continued their work. Pedestrians passed without incident. Yet he remained quietly alert, eyes scanning peripheries, subtle body shifts betraying readiness honed over years of discipline. Even in stillness, he was prepared. Authority did not need to be announced. It did not require applause or acknowledgement. It was silent, controlled, and effective. He returned home, moving through the apartment with deliberate care. The intercom handset, once the conduit of his command, now rested quietly on a shelf. Its purpose fulfilled, it no longer drew attention, just another object in a life that appeared ordinary to outsiders. He cleaned the kitchen slowly, methodically, each motion a reminder that normalcy was a choice, even after chaos. The girls' laughter from the previous evening lingered in his memory, a quiet testament to protection achieved and innocence preserved. Sitting at the small desk by the window, he opened a notebook, jotting down observations from the night. Tactics, timing, contingencies, and reflections on restraint, all recorded for personal review, not for anyone else. The discipline of accountability had always been solitary. Recognition was irrelevant. What mattered was moral clarity, competence, and the invisible fulfillment of duty. He paused, looking out over the streets below, the sunlight casting long shadows over familiar rooftops. There was no applause, no headlines, no colleagues lauding his actions. Only the weight of his own consciousness, the quiet assurance that what had been required of him had been executed fully, ethically, and successfully. The hidden authority remained exactly that, hidden, yet undeniable in its impact. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. A neighbor needed a small favor, mundane, ordinary human. He helped without hesitation, gestures calm, movements precise, eyes alert even in the simplicity of the task. Even in this small interaction, the principles of care, competence, and discretion guided him. Quiet strength was not reserved for dramatic moments. It defined every action, every decision, every breath. As the day drew on, the world remained unaware of the extraordinary control that had quietly shaped events. He prepared a simple dinner, read letters from the girls' caretakers, and finally allowed himself to sit back and breathe. The moral weight of the night had been carried responsibly, and now in this quiet conclusion it could rest. He did not seek recognition, and none was forthcoming. That was as it should be. True authority, he knew, often operated unseen, shaping outcomes without ever announcing itself. He looked out the window one final time before night fell again. The city glowed softly under streetlights, unaware of the near catastrophe avoided. He allowed himself a private acknowledgement. The girls were safe, the threat neutralized, morality intact, and competence demonstrated without display. That was enough. The world could remain ignorant. The quiet ending, heavy with meaning, was his alone.